Illegal jokes, quotes, thoughts, and aphorisms. I thought that here we'd arrived at the fourth or fifth episode. I might as well get around to deciding on a name, I suppose. Although the name was decided a long time ago. I've had this for a long time. I just forgot to do it. Anyway, the name of this thing is Illegal Jokes, Quotes, Thoughts, and Aphorisms. So, okay, so I need a new title. I don't want to call these all humor because illegal jokes is humor, but quotes, thoughts, and aphorisms may not be. And this one is a quote. Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep, his cupidity may at some point be satiated. But for those who torment us for our own good, will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. Sometimes I wish I didn't stutter. Those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. I don't believe that. They may be more likely to go to heaven, yet, or at the same time, likelier to make a hell of earth. So this is C.S. Lewis, and C.S. Lewis was writing a long time ago. And I think that, in fact, he was probably expressing a bit of frustration with the church. The church contains a good many moral busybodies, but I included in my work illegal. See, there's the hint of what my work is about. It's illegal. Jokes, quotes, thoughts, and aphorisms. Okay, this is another quote. The surest way to work up a crusade in favor of some good cause is to promise people they will have a chance of maltreating someone. That's pretty bad. The surest way to work up a crusade in favor of some good cause is to promise people they will have a chance of maltreating someone. To be able to destroy with good conscience. To be able to behave badly and call your bad behavior righteous indignation. This is the height of psychological luxury, the most delicious of moral treats. That's Aldous Huxley from one of his earlier works, Chrome Yellow. And then, so what I've done is I've just started at the top where the title was, right? And what I've come across is something else. This is about the Freedom Convoy, which I wanted to get to anyway. I recommend a few videos. Yeah, I'm just going to read it off as I got it here. Okay, here's the Freedom Convoy Code of Conduct. In the event of violence, threat of violence, in the event of violence or the threat of violence, disengage and inform an officer. In the event of violence, or the threat of violence, disengage and inform an officer. Be kind and respectful towards your fellow Canadians and international supporters. We're working with authorities to help ensure public safety. We ask that all individuals be on their best behavior while spreading the message of unity, love, and forgiveness. The Canada Unity Freedom Convoy condemns all hate symbols. Individuals who are expressing messages of hate and division are not members of the Bear Hug movement. May have not have known that they were thought of themselves as the Bear Hug movement. Individuals who incite hate or violence do not represent the values of Canada Unity and Bear Hug participants. Again, it's just a short bit that I wrote about this a long time ago. And I sort of threw it away, but now that I come back on it, I think it's pretty interesting. So it's almost impossible to predict how much trouble the Liberals are or in over their apparent, more like obvious misuse of the Emergencies Act. I can't predict how much trouble they're in, because we haven't even really begun to talk about how much trouble they're going to be in if it's found, and it's already been found, that they brought in the Emergencies Act unjustifiably. There's no way. If there's some legal finagling, that's one thing. But anybody that's got a brain already knows that they're unjustified. It's been proven in committee already. Anybody who doesn't know that hasn't watched the committee hearings. It's obvious. And I'll get to it, the ways in which, they just lied about violent extremists funding the thing, and, a bunch of racists and sexists doing stuff that were part of the Freedom Convoy. They're lying. They're lying all through it. Okay, so the thing is, here it is. Do this again. It's impossible to predict how much trouble the Liberals are in over their apparent, more like obvious misuse of the Emergencies Act. No Canadian government has ever invoked the Act, and so neither has one done it with so little justification. So not only has no government ever done it before, definitely none has done it with as little justification as they had. So we're in uncharted waters. Don't know. Seriously, when has anything as stupid as this happened to Canada before? So there's no precedent for the judicial system to rely on and refer to. And the people who wrote the relevant laws could not in their wildest dreams have imagined such an incompetent and malicious ruling party. So that's a bit of pontificating on my behalf, but it is what I think. Let's hope that the laws are sufficient, because it is essential that potential tyrants, and that is what we're talking about here, fighting tyranny, that potential tyrants be sent a clear message that if they interfere with our democratic rights, again, they will be punished through the educational process, I doubt that, through the election process, and the court of public opinion, which will become the educational process, but also through the official court system. They need to be punished. We have to work out a punishment for them. You can't bring in the Emergencies Act unjustifiably and blatantly unjustifiably without some punishment, can you? Anyway, the process has begun. So it goes on to say that first we have to understand the Liberal government's tendency to disregard and diminish the democratic, civil, and human rights of Canadians. The invocation of the Act violated the right to assemble and to protest, and it also violated the right to the mandates to bodily integrity in the first place. So they interfered with our right to assemble when they brought it in, froze bank accounts, people went to jail. Largely peaceful protests were violently dispersed. You must have heard about the bouncy castles by now. Bank accounts were frozen. And at the whole time that this was happening, something I don't think Canadians know either is that public intellectuals from around the world, many with a history of fairly astute insight into governments gone wrong in the past, and with some insight into the Trudeau government, they watched in amazement as the Freedom Convoy grew into the largest truck convoy anywhere, ever. We set the record by quite a bit, and other countries really took a stab at it. We beat India even. Can you imagine that? I don't know, we got better roads probably. So the world was watching us. There were copycat truck convoys all over the world. We were kind of the big thing. We're just in reality, in the alternate universe where I reside. Justin Trudeau is the most horrific joke ever. He's a joke because he's a joke, but he's horrific because he's a potential dictator type. Like, if people keep voting for him, he'll keep interfering with our rights. All it takes is enough people to be sucked in by that idiot. So, they go to all the expense of going there. How much money that would have cost. Lost jobs. They couldn't take their kids to school, or, they're not home. They got to be there, right? All those guys drove all the way out to Ottawa in conjunction with the police. The whole thing was done in coordination with the police. How, did you know that? If you didn't know that, then it's because you haven't watched the committee hearings, for one. But also it would be because you don't pay any attention to independent news. To me, I knew that. Anyway, so these guys, they show up there, and Trudeau refused to meet them and directed hate speech their way. If you're calling people racist, you're engaging in hate speech. Because it's the most hateful thing that you can think of, is to be racist by your own reasoning. The most hateful things. You call a person that, so you're saying that person's really about as bad as they can get, according to your paradigm, right? And you're also making people afraid of that person because you're saying that he's racist. So it's hate speech. It's incitement to hatred. Because if I'm a racist, of course, why wouldn't everybody hate me? That's what they're supposed to hate, right? So you throw that around, it has the potential to be very serious. But because you're such a joke, nobody cares what you say. Black people think you're an idiot. The ones that I meet think you're an idiot. If they think about you at all. Yeah, so that's all I have from just a snippet of that. I can't. Okay, I know, because I had a bunch written about the Freedom Convoy. I've got a bunch of stuff written down on paper someplace. There it is. Yeah, I think I'm going to use the paper version. Might be better. So in a sense, the place to start chronologically is with them making the decision to bring in the mandates. And what has to be known about that is that the cabinet, or whoever it was put together to actually, some group of people decided to bring in the mandates. None of them were epidemiologists. None of them were epidemiologists who made that decision. That does not look good. In nobody's rear view mirror or front rear mirror. Does that make a bit of sense? It just doesn't. And it's not just incompetence. It's that they probably thought that if the epidemiologists had come in, the mandates wouldn't have held up as well as they did. There would have been caveats, and it would have grown a lot more complicated for them. So they just didn't bother. After all the fall of the science stuff, right? So that's how it started, right? And then there's the progress of the disease through the country and all that. You don't want to diminish how bad it was and all that. But people saw him as a tyrant for a lot of reasons. And that's why they finally stood up to him. He acts like a tyrant. He comes out and insults people. That's not, no guidebook to dealing with protests would say, oh yeah, ignore them and then insult them, when they've kind of indicated pretty clearly They just want you to listen. Like they just drove all the way across the country and you ignore them and insult them. This just is beyond stupid. Yeah, I don't really have this very well organized, but another thing that has to be pointed out is that, there was the terrible situation in the hospitals, and that happened for sure, but the hospital system was, to put it in simple terms, it was obviously pretty frayed if it couldn't handle that. It didn't take much to push it over. And part of the problem is that nobody gets on anybody's case to stay healthy. Not enough. If we want medical costs to go down, we have to take better care of our health. But, they wouldn't have the guts to tell Canadians that. As it turns out, it doesn't matter the profession. Women tend to take quite a bit of time off of work. And since most of the medical system now is run by women, it's harder to find nurses and doctors. Because they like to take time off from work to take care of their kids. That's just what they choose to do that. They don't do it because it makes them more money. It doesn't make them more money. It doesn't make them any money, but they decide to do that. So that's going to put a real strain on the medical system. Like if anybody just wanted to have anything resembling a rational, honest conversation, you'd have to say, that was a part of it as well. And then the vaccine proved to be so disappointing, didn't it? It didn't stop transmission. But there's all these side effects linked to it: Bell's palsy, myocarditis. I've heard of there's some really serious stuff too. And and the other thing is just the number of people dying of heart attacks. Like since the vaccine came in, you want to be clear about this. Since the vaccine came in, there's been an increase in the number of young men dying of heart attacks. That's not a made-up statistic. That's real. So how are you going to explain that to the family members whose brothers and sisters died or whatever? Brian Peckford wrote with a team the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and he's not happy. He wrote the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the ones that were violated if the invocation of the Act is found to have been unjustified. If it was unjustified, then every action taken after was unjustified. He likes to point that out. So freezing the bank accounts, there's got to be some consequences. But like I said at the beginning, we don't know what those consequences are going to be. Yeah, people were put in jail. Tamara Litch is a Métis grandmother, folk singer, a worker. So I don't know what kind of work she does, but she's some kind of worker. And when they arrested her the last time, they put her on a countrywide warrant, which they only do for the worst sorts of offenders. Can you imagine how many people did? I'm not going to say worse things than she did, because she didn't do anything bad. She didn't do anything bad at all. She was a hero, and that was the treatment they gave her. Marched her out with her. The thing is the countrywide warrant, they didn't need it because they knew exactly where she was, so it's just nonsense. But it just stepped up the severity with which the cops would come in and fucking chain her up and all that. That's really true. That happened. So the number of people that are on their case, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is on their case. Brian Peckford, who wrote the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, is on their case. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association is on their case. I think Alberta's got a lawsuit. And when they start smelling blood in the water on this, this is the thing is that the Canadian citizen is going to wind up having to pay for all the lawsuits against the Canadian government. Imagine now, after all that they did, now we're going to get stuck paying off these lawsuits because they're going to come in. People lost businesses and stuff like that. My God. And they got a Liberal who judged the committee meeting so far. Or maybe it's the next one coming up. I don't know who this Paul Boulot is. Paul Boulot is the judge. Yeah, it appears that they've deleted emails. Because what we want is to see the communication that went on between them when they were bringing in the mandate.